Captain Rhea Logan stood alone in the dim light of the command center, her eyes fixed on the strange, ancient map that had been brought to her. The map was not like any she had seen before. It was old, so old that its edges were worn and cracked, and the ink, though still legible, had long since begun to fade. Yet it was the map to something she couldn't ignore. It was the key to an old warship, hidden deep within the uncharted regions of space, and it had been lying dormant for centuries. It had been a quiet day in the fleet. Nothing but routine patrols and the usual reports. But something about this map, something about the way it had come to her, set her on edge. The map had been found by a salvage crew, a group of treasure hunters who had gone too deep into the abandoned space station near the edge of the galaxy. Their last transmission had been brief, nothing more than a cryptic line. "We've found something. It's big. Too big." That was all, followed by a sudden loss of contact. Rhea felt a pang of curiosity and doubt. The ship she commanded, the Vanguard, was not a ship meant for exploration. It was built for war, a ship designed to stand against the enemy fleets that might one day come to Earth's door. But this mission, this map, was different. The information had come through a source she didn't trust, from people who had no business dealing with ancient relics. Still, there was no turning back. It was her job to lead, to make decisions, even if those decisions made her feel uneasy. After a long moment, Rhea stood, the cold metal floor beneath her feet grounding her to the reality of the situation. She knew she had no choice but to investigate. "Prepare the crew for departure," she ordered into her communicator, her voice steady, but with a hint of something unspoken beneath it. "We're heading to the coordinates." Her crew had been expecting a routine mission. Instead, they found themselves racing toward an unknown fate. The Vanguard jumped into warp space, the stars stretching out into long lines of light as the ship hurtled through the void. Rhea spent the hours leading up to their arrival in silence, pondering what lay ahead. The station they were heading to was far from any known civilization, a place where few had ventured and fewer had returned. The old warship, the map claimed, was buried within its depths, waiting for someone to find it. When they finally arrived, the space station loomed ahead, a massive derelict structure floating in the blackness. It was as if the station had been abandoned for centuries, yet it still held a strange, unsettling presence. The ship seemed almost alive, its dark hull absorbing the light from the distant stars. The crew could see nothing but shadows and echoes through the ship's scanners. Something about the place felt wrong, like an ancient beast waking from a long slumber. "Prepare to board," Rhea ordered, her voice low but firm. She knew what they were about to do wasn't safe. In fact, it was far from it. But her duty as a captain, as a leader, was clear. They would find the ship, no matter the cost. The airlock hissed open, and the crew stepped onto the station's surface. It was eerily quiet. The only sound was the soft hum of the Vanguard's engines in the distance. The station was dark, its corridors cold and silent. It didn't take long for the crew to realize they weren't alone. The walls of the station were covered in strange symbols, etched deep into the metal, as though they had been carved with purpose that was long lost to time. They followed the map, deeper and deeper into the heart of the station. Rhea could feel her pulse quicken with each step. The strange weight of the place pressed in on her, the silence growing heavier as they moved forward. She had been in many dangerous situations, but none like this. The station felt like it was watching them, as if the very walls were alive, waiting for them to make a mistake. It was as though the past itself was holding its breath, waiting to reveal its secrets. Finally, they reached a massive, sealed door. It was old, rusted, and covered in more of the strange symbols that adorned the station's walls. This was it. The door was the final barrier between them and whatever lay beyond. Rhea stepped forward, her heart racing. She knew the ship was inside. She could feel it. She could sense its presence, like a faint whisper on the edge of her mind. It was ancient, older than anything humanity had ever encountered, yet it felt powerful, untamed. The kind of power that could change everything. "Ready the tools," she instructed, her voice steady. There was no turning back now. With a loud hiss, the door slid open, revealing a massive hangar. The space was vast, with towering walls and dark shadows that stretched across the floor. In the center of the hangar, half buried beneath layers of dust and debris, lay the ship. It was huge, its design unfamiliar, a mix of strange alien architecture and human military technology. Its hull was battered, worn by centuries of neglect, but even in its dormant state, it exuded a sense of authority. The ship had been built for war. Rhea could feel it in her bones. It was a weapon unlike anything she had ever seen. "Is this it?" one of the crew members asked, his voice filled with awe and fear. Rhea nodded, unable to speak. There were no words for what she was feeling. The sight of the ship was overwhelming, like looking into the heart of something ancient and powerful. This was no ordinary vessel. This was a weapon of unimaginable power. The kind of weapon that could tip the balance of the entire galaxy. The crew moved quickly, setting up the necessary equipment to bring the ship back online. Rhea watched as they worked, her mind racing. What would happen once the ship was reactivated? What kind of power lay dormant within its systems? And most importantly, would humanity be ready to wield such power? The air was thick with tension as the crew continued their work. Every click of a tool, every beep of a console, seemed to echo through the massive hangar. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the ship's systems began to hum. Lights flickered on, casting an eerie glow across the hangar. Slowly, the ship's engines stirred to life. It was awake. Rhea stood there, staring at the ship, her mind a whirl of thoughts and questions. The Phoenix, this ancient warship, had been dormant for centuries, but now it was ready. It was more than just a ship. It was a legacy that would shape the future of humanity. But with its awakening came the knowledge that something else was stirring, something dangerous. The galaxy was about to change, and humanity would have to face a challenge like never before. The crew stood in stunned silence, their eyes fixed on the Phoenix. The ship had been reborn, and with it, a new chapter in human history was about to begin. Captain Rhea Logan stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, staring out into the vast emptiness of space. The stars twinkled like distant fires, indifferent to the events unfolding just beyond the edge of their reach. Her mind, however, was far from the serene beauty of the cosmos. She had just received disturbing news that shook her to the core. A massive alien fleet, led by the notorious Varkan Empire, was advancing toward Earth at an alarming rate. The Varkans were unlike any enemy humanity had ever faced. They were ruthless, technologically superior, and they had a history of eradicating civilizations that dared to stand in their way. This was not a simple skirmish. The Varkans had come to conquer, and Earth was their next target. Rhea had heard rumors of their fleet's power, ships that could destroy entire planets with a single shot, weapons that could cripple even the most advanced human defenses, and soldiers who were as terrifying as they were unstoppable. But nothing could have prepared her for the reality of the threat that was now on the horizon. "Captain," Lieutenant Holt's voice broke through her thoughts. He was a young officer, barely out of the academy, but his eyes were sharp, and his instincts were already seasoned by the tension that seemed to hang in the air. "The alien fleet is less than 3 days away from Earth's orbit. Our forces are not equipped to handle this kind of threat. The Phoenix may be our only hope." Rhea turned to face him, her expression hardening. The Phoenix, the ancient warship they had just awakened, was humanity's last line of defense. But it wasn't enough. Not against the sheer might of the Varkan fleet. They were vastly outnumbered and outgunned. Yet, despite the overwhelming odds, there was a fire in her chest, a burning sense of duty that refused to let her give up. If she was going to lose, she would lose fighting, with everything she had. "Have the fleet commanders been informed?" she asked, her voice calm but carrying the weight of their dire situation. "Yes, Captain. They've already begun mobilizing forces, but we're talking about an enemy that can wipe out entire battalions in mere minutes. If we don't have a solid plan, Earth won't stand a chance. Rhea nodded, acknowledging the truth of Holt's words. The Vanguard was a formidable ship, but it was still just one ship. And the Phoenix, though powerful, was an unknown quantity. They didn't yet understand its full capabilities. How could they? It was a relic from a long-forgotten age, and even its reactivation had been a leap of faith. The tension on the bridge was palpable. Rhea could feel the eyes of her crew on her, waiting for her to make a decision. Her mind raced, weighing the options. She had little time. The Varkan fleet was only hours away from Earth, and she needed to act quickly, decisively. "Gather the senior officers," she said, her voice firm. "We need to come up with a strategy. This is not just about fighting. This is about surviving." As the crew members filtered in, Rhea glanced at the holographic map that floated before her. The Varkan fleet was vast. Thousands of ships, all designed for warfare. They moved with eerie precision, like a swarm of locusts descending on a helpless planet. Each ship in the fleet was a marvel of alien technology, with sleek, dark exteriors that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Their weapons were capable of disabling entire fleets in seconds, their shields nearly impenetrable. And their tactics were ruthless. Strike hard, strike fast, and leave no survivors. "Captain, we've received new intelligence." Commander Thorne spoke up, his face grim as he looked at the data on his screen. "The Varkans are not just heading for Earth. They're targeting our major defense bases first, the ones closest to the planet's atmosphere. Once they destroy those, they'll have a clear path to Earth itself. If we don't act now, they'll have us cornered before we can even respond." Rhea's mind whirred as she took in this new information. The stakes had just been raised. They couldn't afford to wait. But attacking the Varkans head-on was suicide. They had no chance of winning a direct confrontation. Yet there was one option they hadn't explored: the Phoenix. "We don't know what the Phoenix can do," Rhea said, her voice steady. "But it's our only shot. We can use it to strike at their command ship, disrupt their coordination, and buy time for the rest of the fleet to regroup. If we can create chaos within their ranks, we might have a chance." "But Captain," Holt interjected, his brow furrowed, "what if we can't control the Phoenix? What if we awaken something inside it that we don't understand? What if it backfires?" Rhea turned to face him, her gaze unwavering. "We don't have the luxury of hesitation. If we don't try, we'll lose everything. The Phoenix is our only hope. We have to trust in it." There was a long pause as her officers absorbed the weight of her words. Finally, Commander Thorne spoke again. "Captain, if you believe it's our best shot, then I'm with you." Rhea nodded, then looked at the crew. "We don't have much time. We're going to take the Phoenix into battle. Our goal is simple: create confusion, force the Varkans to divide their forces, disrupt their command structure, and give Earth's defenders a fighting chance." The crew moved quickly, each of them understanding the gravity of the situation. The Vanguard would stay behind to protect Earth's orbit and defend against any immediate threats. But the Phoenix, an old warship with untold power, would lead the charge into the heart of the alien fleet. There was no room for error. As the Phoenix prepared for launch, Rhea couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She had spent hours studying the ship, and while its power was undeniable, it was also deeply unsettling. The ship was alive in a way that she couldn't explain. The humming of its engines felt like a heartbeat, and the way the ship's weapon systems powered up seemed almost eager. She didn't know if this ship was a blessing or a curse, but there was no turning back now. The Phoenix broke through the atmosphere, heading straight for the Varkan fleet. As it entered the outer perimeter, Rhea's heart pounded in her chest. The enemy ships were massive, their weapons bristling with energy. The Varkans were a force unlike any the human race had ever encountered. They were fast, efficient, and deadly. Yet, as the Phoenix approached, Rhea could feel the tension rise. She had no idea what was about to happen. Suddenly, the silence of space was broken by a series of blinding flashes. The Phoenix fired its first shot, a beam of pure energy that sliced through the void, striking one of the Varkan ships. The blast was followed by an explosion that sent shockwaves through the enemy fleet. But the Phoenix didn't stop. It moved like a phantom, its ancient weapons cutting through the darkness, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. For a brief moment, it seemed as though the Phoenix could hold its own. The Varkans, caught off guard, began to scatter. But Rhea knew this was only the beginning. The enemy was vast, and they wouldn't be stopped by one ship, no matter how powerful. The battle had just begun, and the stakes were higher than ever. The silence of space was shattered by the screech of metal and the roar of energy. Captain Rhea Logan gripped the command chair with both hands, her knuckles white, as the Phoenix surged through the void, its powerful engines pushing it toward the heart of the Varkan fleet. The ship was alive with energy, humming with untapped power, as though it were more than just a vessel. It was a living entity, eager for the fight. Rhea had never felt anything like it. The sensation was both exhilarating and terrifying. There was no turning back now. The Phoenix had awoken, and it was about to show its true power. "We're entering the enemy's range, Captain." Lieutenant Holt's voice was tense but steady. The young officer's eyes were locked on his console, his fingers flying across the controls. "The Varkans are coming into position. We're about to be surrounded." Rhea didn't flinch. "Hold steady. Prepare for evasive maneuvers." "Understood," Holt replied, his voice sharp. The Varkan fleet was vast, a nearly endless sea of warships, their dark, jagged forms looming like predators in the night. Their weapon systems flared to life, and a wave of destructive energy blasted toward the Phoenix. But Rhea was ready. The Phoenix wasn't just any ship. It was a relic of a time long past, a weapon forged for war on a scale the Varkans could not comprehend. "Shields up," Rhea commanded. In an instant, the Phoenix shimmered as its shields activated, absorbing the first wave of incoming fire. The ship rocked under the force of the blasts, but it held strong. Rhea could feel the power of the ship beneath her, a raw, untamed force, ready to strike back at the alien invaders. "Fire weapons," she ordered. The Phoenix's guns roared to life, and a series of concentrated energy blasts ripped through the Varkan formation. The alien ships exploded in a shower of sparks and fire, their shields barely able to withstand the onslaught. The Varkans were skilled, but they had never faced anything like this. The Phoenix moved with a deadly grace, its weapons cutting through the enemy like a blade through paper. "Direct hit," Lieutenant Holt shouted, his voice filled with disbelief. "One of their flagship cruisers is down." Rhea didn't allow herself to smile. This was just the beginning. The stars flickered, their cold light illuminating the vast emptiness of space. The fleet of alien warships, a menacing array of sleek, black ships, loomed like predators circling their prey. On the bridge of the human vessel Resolute, Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrests of her chair, eyes fixed on the view screen, her thoughts racing. The enemy fleet, far larger and technologically superior, had arrived in the Sol system. They were here to conquer Earth. And yet, in that moment, Captain Voss could feel it. The unyielding, unstoppable force that had carried humanity through centuries of struggle. It wasn't technology or superior firepower that made humans powerful. It was their will to fight, their refusal to give up. "Captain, their shields are holding," Lieutenant Cora reported, her voice strained with the effort of pushing the Resolute to its limits. "We've hit them several times, but they're not budging." Ilara's jaw tightened. They had to do more than hit them. The human fleet was small, just a handful of ships left after the initial assault. But there was something about humanity that made them dangerous. Their ingenuity, their determination, and their ability to adapt in the face of impossible odds. It was this that made the Varkan fleet underestimate them. "Prepare to launch a full barrage," Ilara said, her voice unwavering. We're not backing down. We fight to the last breath if we have to. Yes, Captain, Cora responded, her fingers flying over the controls. The ship trembled as its weapons powered up, the deep hum of the engines resonating through the deck. The crew was ready. They had no choice. Earth's survival depended on this fight. On the command deck, the tension was palpable. Every officer was focused, every member of the crew aware that this might be their last stand. The Resolute wasn't just a ship. It was humanity's defiance, its fight for survival. It had been built in secret, with the last of Earth's resources, designed to hold off the overwhelming force of the alien invaders. Yet, as the Varkan fleet bore down, Ilara knew that their technology, despite its advanced weapons, was nothing compared to humanity's indomitable spirit. "Captain, their flagship is about to fire," Lieutenant Darnell called out. "We're in their sights." Ilara's mind raced. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and yet, in the darkest moments of history, humanity had always found a way. It was this belief that had led them to create the Resolute, to gather every ounce of their willpower to make a stand. "All hands, brace for impact," she shouted, standing from her chair, her voice firm with resolve. She turned to Cora. "I want a full evasive maneuver. We can't let them get the first shot." "Aye, Captain," Cora replied, her fingers a blur of motion as she adjusted the ship's trajectory. The Resolute swerved to the left, narrowly avoiding a beam of intense energy that shattered the space where it had been only moments ago. The ship jolted, a deep vibration running through its hull, but it held steady. "Return fire," Ilara ordered, her gaze steely. The crew did not hesitate. The weapons of the Resolute screamed in fury, streaks of light racing toward the alien flagship. The Varkan's shields flickered but held firm, their energy absorbing most of the blast. Yet, for the first time, the Varkan fleet seemed to falter. There was a crack in their confidence, a momentary hesitation. They hadn't expected this fight. "We're making a dent," Cora shouted, a mixture of surprise and hope in her voice. "Their shields are weakening." Ilara smiled grimly. Humanity wasn't known for giving up easily, and that was exactly what the Varkans didn't understand. They could crush cities, destroy fleets, but they could never break the human spirit. It was something they had never encountered before. "All ships, focus fire on the flagship," Ilara commanded, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "We've got one shot at this. Give it everything you've got." The Resolute and the few remaining human ships turned in unison, their weapons unleashing a barrage of destruction. The Varkan flagship shuddered as the blasts hammered its shields, sparks flying from its hull. And then, with one final, concentrated strike, the flagship's shield collapsed entirely, and the Resolute's weapons struck true, tearing through the alien ship's core. The alien flagship exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The shockwave rippled through space, and for a brief moment, there was nothing but the quiet hum of the Resolute's engines. "Flagship down," Cora called out, a note of disbelief in her voice. "We did it, Captain." Ilara exhaled slowly, allowing herself a moment of relief. But she knew they weren't out of danger yet. The Varkan fleet was still vast, still filled with countless ships ready to retaliate. And the Resolute was no invincible force. Its hull had taken damage. Its weapons were running low on power. They had won a battle, but the war was far from over. "Don't celebrate yet," Ilara said, her voice steady. "They'll retaliate. Get ready for their next move." As if on cue, the Varkan fleet surged forward, regrouping, reorganizing. They were angry now, their pride wounded, their strategy shaken. But the Resolute and its crew had already prepared for this. The human ships scattered, breaking formation and evading incoming fire, darting and weaving with the agility that the Varkans hadn't anticipated. Every crew member knew their role, and every officer moved with precision, their minds sharp, focused on the task at hand. The next wave of Varkan fire came, but the Resolute's crew was ready. They anticipated the movements of the enemy ships, dodging and weaving through the onslaught of energy blasts. Ilara's heart pounded, but she kept her focus on the battle, keeping her crew engaged. Every decision, every command mattered. Suddenly, a new report flashed on the screen. A Varkan cruiser had broken off from the main fleet and was charging toward the Resolute. Its weapons powered up, and the alien ship fired a devastating beam directly at them. "Brace for impact," Ilara shouted. The beam hit, and the Resolute shuddered violently, its shields flickering dangerously. The ship groaned under the strain, but it held. "All systems are holding, Captain," Cora reported, her voice tight. "But we've taken heavy damage. We're running low on power." "Then we make this count," Ilara said, her voice resolute. "Focus all remaining fire on that cruiser. We can't let it get close." The Resolute shifted course, unleashing everything it had left at the charging cruiser. In a final burst of energy, the cruiser exploded, its twisted remains floating in the vacuum of space. The crew of the Resolute stood in stunned silence, knowing they had won this battle. The alien fleet was now in disarray, their forces shattered. The Varkans, once so certain of their victory, were now retreating, regrouping, their resolve broken. Ilara gazed out into the stars, the battle finally over, for now. Humanity had proven once again that it would never be defeated, no matter the odds. Their will, their unshakable determination, had triumphed over the invaders. Earth was safe for now, but Ilara knew this was only the beginning. Humanity's fight had just begun, but they would face whatever came next with the same unstoppable will that had carried them through the darkest of times. They would never stop fighting. The stars gleamed coldly in the endless night of space, an expanse so vast that even the mightiest fleets had to bow to its indifference. For weeks now, the alien fleet, a force unlike anything humanity had ever encountered, had circled Earth, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The Varkans, a race known for their ruthless efficiency and technological superiority, had come to claim the planet as their own. Earth's defenses had crumbled in the initial assault, but one ship remained, a symbol of humanity's unbreakable spirit, the Titan. It was old, battered, and outclassed by the enemy's advanced warships, but it was all humanity had left, and it would fight until the last. Captain Mark Ellis stood at the helm of the Titan, his gaze fixed on the massive screen before him. The enemy ships, sleek and towering, filled the display, their weapons powered up and ready to unleash hell. The crew of the Titan was smaller now, many of them wounded or lost in the early skirmishes, but they were not broken. They would never break. "Captain, their fleet is closing in," Lieutenant Monroe said, his voice tense. "They're preparing to fire." Ellis took a deep breath. He had seen humanity pushed to its limits before, but nothing like this. The aliens didn't just want Earth, they wanted to erase humanity from existence. And yet, here they were, ready to strike back. "We fight, or we die," Ellis said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. He knew what was at stake. This wasn't just a fight for survival. This was humanity's last stand, and they would make sure the Varkans would remember it. "Prepare the ship for evasive maneuvers," Ellis ordered. "All hands, brace yourselves." The Titan shuddered as the engines roared to life, surging forward with incredible force. The ship rocked as the first volley of energy blasts from the Varkans hit, shaking the hull. Sparks flew from several panels, and alarms blared, but the Titan held its ground. The crew worked quickly, coordinating the repairs and defenses as the ship dipped and swerved through the barrage of alien fire. The Varkans had underestimated the resilience of humanity, and that was their mistake. "Captain, the shields are holding, but we're taking damage to the port side," Monroe shouted over the noise of the battle. Ellis gritted his teeth. "Give us everything we've got." Return fire. The weapons of the Titan roared to life, its cannons launching a barrage of missiles toward the Varkan fleet. The blasts hit their targets, sending shockwaves through the enemy ships. For a moment, it seemed like the tide might be turning, But the Varkans were quick to regroup, their shields rising again, stronger than before. "Captain, we're outnumbered. We can't keep this up for long," said Commander Taylor, her voice strained with effort. "We need a plan." Ellis turned to face her, his eyes narrowing in thought. They had only one advantage left: humanity's ability to think on its feet, to adapt and survive against all odds. The Titan might not have the firepower to match the Varkans, but it had something more valuable: a crew that refused to give up, no matter the cost. "I've got a plan," Ellis said, his voice firm with resolve. "It's risky, but it's our best shot. We're going to split the fleet. I want the remaining fighters to draw their attention while we hit them with everything we have from a different angle." Monroe raised an eyebrow. "You want us to lure them into a trap?" Ellis nodded. "Exactly. If we can disrupt their formation, we can create an opening. It's our only chance." With a mixture of disbelief and determination, the crew sprang into action. The remaining fighter ships, small but fast, darted out from the Titan, drawing the Varkan ships away from their formation. The Varkans took the bait, pursuing the smaller ships with deadly intent, leaving their larger vessels exposed for just a moment. That was all they needed. The Titan surged forward, its remaining weapons charged and ready. It fired everything it had in a single devastating assault. The shots hit true, piercing the Varkan ships' weakened shields and tearing through their hulls. One by one, the enemy vessels began to explode in brilliant flashes of light, their destruction echoing across the battlefield. The crew of the Titan cheered, but Ellis didn't let himself relax. They had won a battle, but the war wasn't over. The Varkans would regroup, and they would come at them with everything they had. "Captain, the remaining enemy ships are attempting to regroup," Monroe reported. "We've taken out half their fleet, but there's still a lot left." Ellis stared at the screen. The Varkans were formidable, but humanity had something they didn't: a relentless drive to survive. He wouldn't let them fail now. He wouldn't let humanity be wiped out like so many other species before them. "Hold them off. We're going to end this now," he said, determination flooding his veins. The battle continued, fierce and unforgiving. The Titan and its remaining allies were surrounded, outnumbered and outgunned, but they fought with everything they had. The Varkans had underestimated the human spirit. As the hours wore on, the human fleet began to whittle down the alien forces, their relentless attacks slowly breaking the Varkan formation apart. Then, as the Varkan flagship loomed before them, the Titan made its final push. With one last, coordinated strike, the Titan and its fighters launched everything they had left. The Varkan flagship, their command ship, the symbol of their might, erupted in a spectacular explosion, sending shockwaves throughout the fleet. The remaining Varkan ships hesitated, their commanders in shock. They had lost their leader, their symbol of invincibility. The human ships took advantage of the opening, launching a final, decisive attack that shattered the remaining enemy forces. The battle was won. Silence fell over the battlefield, broken only by the hum of the Titan's engines. Ellis stood at the helm, watching the remnants of the Varkan fleet retreat, their once formidable force now a scattered remnant of its former self. Humanity had won. Earth was safe. "We did it," Monroe said, her voice filled with awe. Ellis didn't smile, but he nodded. "This victory is just the beginning. Humanity has proven its will. We'll never back down, no matter who comes next." As the Titan drifted among the wreckage of the battle, its crew stood together, knowing they had accomplished the impossible. They had defeated a superior enemy, not through advanced technology or overwhelming force, but through the one thing the Varkans could never comprehend: humanity's unstoppable will to survive.